Hello everyone, and welcome to sadly the last digital MUS session. And today we're going to be talking about e-commerce, consumer protection, and focusing quite a lot on the directive on certain aspects concerning contracts for the sale of goods. It's quite a lot of words, quite a long name, but we'll make sure that this discussion helps you to understand this whole directive a bit better and also what e-commerce means in general. And to do so, we have invited three experts from different fields in e-commerce to speak about the topic and share their perspectives. My name is Maria, and I'll be the moderator of the discussion. So if you happen to have any questions, please send them on YouTube, and we'll make sure to ask them here on Zoom to our speakers. But that's enough from me for now, and I would say that we should now start with a small introduction round. And my first question is, who are you and what is your connection to the directive? Ralph, would you like to go first?
Yeah, with pleasure. Yeah, my name is Ralph Rogenbroek, and I'm very honored to take part in this discussion tonight. I work as a legal advisor in the European Consumer Center. It's a French-German office based in Kiel, in the region in Germany, but at the French-German border. And our job is to offer free assistance and advice to consumers and to assist them free of charge with complaints against traders based in other member states of the European Union, and in Norway, Iceland, and United Kingdom as well. Our network aims particularly at strengthening consumers' trust in the EU internal market, and we also have an observatory role to play. We forward potential dysfunctions of the internal market to the national and European authorities. Yeah. And my connection to this directive, of course, on a daily basis, we receive questions, lots of questions and cross-border consumer complaints about defect products. So as a consequence, we are logically very concerned by the evolution of European policies and legislations about questions like guarantee of conformity. Yeah. That was for me.
Thank you for introduction. Lubomir, would you like to go next?
Yes, thank you. Hi everybody. Thank you for the invitation of the organizers. Thank you, Maria. My name is Lubomir Tanasu from Bulgaria, and I'm a managing partner of IMG. It's Internet Media Group and Tendric Europe companies. So what is my connection to this directive? In our company, we work with a large numbers of online retailers in Europe and manage their digital advertising campaign. Mostly, I am here to say my opinion in my practice.
I think we're all now looking forward to hearing what you have to say and what your perspective is, because you're really active, as we know, and everyone who has read your description on Facebook should also know it. And then finally, Stefan, who are you and what is your connection to this directive?
So hi everybody, good evening. My name is Stefan Simon. I am still a member of the MUS organization team. I was a part of the content team. Well, I am still a part of the content team. And I worked for the past 9 months on exactly this legislative text, as this was the one we choose for the simulation, if it would have happened, but sadly not. And I will be here in this discussion trying to play the role of the Commissioner for Justice, as it would be my role also at the simulation, so maybe to bring to perspective from the Commissioner point of view. And in my private life, I'm a law student and working at the Credit Institute in data protection. So, yeah.
Yeah, we're really glad to have you too. Now we'll first start with a lightning round. So it will be short questions coming from me, and they require mostly yes and or no answer, or just a short answer. So the first question is, do you shop online? Ralph?
Yes, sometimes, not regularly, but Yeah, sometimes.
Lubomir?
Yes, I shop online lately quite often because of COVID-19, and mostly goods like watches and everything that my family needs.
So also buying things for others, presents and so on. And you, Stefan?
Yes, of course, as well.
And then the next question is, what is your favorite e-commerce or online shop platform? Ralph?
Rakuten.
Lubomir?
In general, I shop from different platforms through Europe. I don't have one specific.
Then supporting different companies, great. And you, Stefan?
I don't have a favorite one either, but I think like most of us, I mostly use Amazon. So yeah.
The next question, Lubomir, already kind of answered, but have your online purchases increased during the lockdown? What about you, Ralph?
Yes, it has increased, and we needed garments for my children. And as the shops were all closed, yeah, we had to shop online. Yeah, it has increased during the lockdown, indeed.
Something more to add, Lubomir? Has it really increased a lot your online shopping?
Yes, in our clients, not only from customer, I see it from experience. We have clients that selling food, and they're increasing a lot in these months. And so we have clients in the medical field, and they are too. But our clients in the hotel field, they are not good.
And last but not least, have the purchases of the Commissioner for Justice increased?
Yes, due to the fact that I needed some stuff to kill time during the lockdown. So books and ebooks and stuff like that. So yes.
The next question is, have you ever received an item or a service that didn't correspond to your expectations, meaning that something was broken or probably not functioning that well? Ralph?
No, it didn't happen to me, fortunately.
That's really a lot of luck, but probably also a lot of researching.
Indeed, it's a lot of luck.
And you, Lubomir, have you received something broken?
No, luckily I have everything received good, and it was perfect.
Stefan?
Let's kill the positive answers. I did manage to get something which wasn't compatible with my painter. So, you know, the colors which you put in there. So it wasn't compatible, although it said it should be. So I had to return it.
Probably advice, I don't know, to read more reviews or the description more carefully. I know it's really a consumer. Do you trust enough in the digital single market, Ralph?
Yes, I do. Despite the fact that I don't buy online every day, I do.
Lubomir?
Yes, I really believe in the digital e-commerce market, but in most cases, if I shop from unknown stores, I do my research of them, read a little more about their online presence.
And Stefan?
How couldn't you trust in the digital single market with such good laws? So yes, of course.
That's exactly what the commissioner would say, of course. And the last question is a bit more tricky, but are you confident that you know your rights as a consumer? Ralph?
Yes, I'm confident that I know my rights because it's my job, my everyday job. Of course, I'm really watchful when I'm buying online, when I'm discovering a new website, new platform. I will always look at the legal notice, who is the trader, the terms and conditions. I will always have a look. That's why maybe it never happened to me. I still didn't have problem. I didn't have problem yet. I don't know. I always very watchful.
I think this discussion will also help our audience a lot and teach them some tips from the professionals how to shop online. What about you, Lubomir? Do you know your rights?
And yes and no. Yes, when I think I'm confident, and no, where not. When I see I'm wrong, I think Ralph know better everything.
And our other law expert on the panel today, Stefan, do you know your rights as a consumer or not really?
Of course I do. What kind of law student would I be if I wouldn't know my own rights? So yes, of course.
Okay, and that marks the end of this lightning round. It was really interesting, at least for me, and I hope for the audience as well. So I want to remind you once again to send us your questions and we will ask our speakers here. We're open to everything that you have as concerns or interesting questions. But now, as I've already said, this topic is quite big and probably the term e-commerce is not understandable for everyone. So I would now like to ask our Commissioner for Justice, who sadly didn't get to experience our MUS simulation this year because of the lockdown, but he has this opportunity now to explain to everyone watching what e-commerce is. So Stefan, please tell us a bit more about e-commerce and consumer protection.
Sure. So basically, e-commerce is a term that came from the late 90s, early 2000s, around the dot-com bubble and so on, when the whole trading over the internet and the whole internet thing was a quite new thing. And it was called e-commerce or electronic commerce. So basically, nowadays, online shopping. So this term is still used as its a historical term. And also this legislation should renew certain old legislations, the oldest one from 1999. So I said end of the 90s, an old term called e-commerce. Nowadays, we all do it. It's called online shopping. So basically, you can just put in your head, e-commerce is online shopping. That's it. Nothing too fancy.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect, easy way to describe it. Just online shopping, and that speaks to many people immediately. Now we're starting with a question that's open to everyone. So do you think that more consumer protection, which the EU aims at, is a bigger burden for European companies, especially in an already digitalized market where those companies compete with companies from around the world, so not just within the EU? And does more consumer protection hindering the innovation on the market? Who would like to start first? I see Lubomir.
So I will say my opinion shortly. My opinion is, yes, they will be a burden and will be a problem for the innovation, for the new innovation. Why it would hinder innovation? In general, digital technology are evolving very fast and dynamically, and the regulation cannot follow them. At some point, I see confrontation about new technology and current regulation. Current regulation can be changed at the speed with which new technology are evolving. I think one of the reason is the big bureaucracy.
And now, Stefan, what would you say about it? The EU is often blamed for being too bureaucratic. Would you agree that it applies in this case too?
So look, you have to have an even playing field for a market to work. Yes, there is a high burden on the sellers and everything, but it also gives a higher trust to the consumer. So as an European company, you might get, and you will probably get the advantage in the competition by knowing or by having the name that you're a trustworthy company because you have to be by law. So more consumers will in the end come to you because they know, okay, there are certain laws protecting them if something didn't work out. And this helps also the digital single markets to be a European-wide thing because the real world market already works. And now we are experiencing a new digitalized world. And in the competition of a global world, it also helps because, as mentioned, the consumer knows, okay, this is a European company, so they have protection. So if something doesn't work out, I can send it back and don't have to deal with any legal battles and so on because I am protected. So I think in the end, it's even an advantage in the competition.
And finally, Ralph, do you have something else to add?
I agree with Stefan. At first sight, of course, it can seem as a burden for lots of companies. But on the other side, when we strengthen the consumer confidence in the internal market, of course, it's better for the internal market, and more consumers will buy online and cross-border. More consumers will be confident. This is really important. This is a cornerstone, the consumers' confidence. It's our job on a daily basis. And I think that directives like this one, which is the subject of the panel discussion tonight, will lay down clear rules in terms of legal guarantees, and especially for goods with embedded digital content, connected objects. And of course, it's really important. And more consumer protection within the EU influences consumers' willingness to embrace and trust that type of cross-border purchase or service. And if this is the case, it boosts the confidence of consumers, and it encourages traders and small and medium enterprises to unleash the full potential offered by the internal markets. So I agree with Stefan, of course.
And as we're slowly transitioning to more talks about the directive, I would first like to ask our expert who has worked specifically for MUS and preparing participants' guide on the directive. Why do we need this EU-wide directive for consumer protection, as we already have one, and there's also other directives who are already targeting consumer protection? And if I remember correctly, the last one, who is quite similar to this one, is from 1999. What has changed in so many years?
So exactly that's the point. The last one is from 1999. So from a time where the internet was a Wild West. Let's put it frank, it was a Wild West. It wasn't regulated. We didn't know what it will be. Some experts claimed it will not survive the next 5 years. And it's just a hype. At the end, we see 20 years later, we have more and more digitalization. We buy more and more online because it's easier. Let's put it this way, right? So you just click and you get your stuff, but you have also a lot of to choose from, and then you might start buying stuff without being protected. So one reason for having a new regulation is the time which passed, because 20 years is an extremely long time in an innovative area like e-commerce, like digitalization and so on. I think on this we can all agree. So why do we do it on the European-wide level? It's basically one of the fundamental ideas of the European Union to have a single market. We reached this in an analog world, so in the material world, and now we try to implement it also in a digital world, because first of all, it brings more growth, it brings more consume, it brings new business opportunities, because you have to think that a lot of small businesses can profit from a clear framework on this. Because if I'm sitting, for example, in Slovakia, and now I'm trying to sell some products because I'm a small company, the easiest way to do it is to open an online shop where I know, okay, this set of rules applies all over Europe. I need to know this set of rules, sure, but it's one set of rules instead of 28. Well, sadly, next year, 27. But you see, it brings also a lot of business opportunities because, as I mentioned, setting up a website is nowadays so hard, and selling online, you just send it by post. And if you have one framework, it brings growth, it brings new jobs, and so on. So that's why we need such a regulation, because it's one of the main pillars of the European Union to have a single market. So I think that answers it quite well.
Yeah, thank you very much for that explanation. And I think it would be also interesting to hear what Lubomir's perspective on that is. Do you really think that those rules and the law in general provides businesses with more orientation, even gives more opportunities to them?
Do they give more opportunities? Yes or no, I think. I don't have a strong opinion in this. No, I don't know.
Okay. So then I'll move on to another question that is to all of you. It's about the directive now. It covers the liability of the seller to the consumer for software when provided as a part of goods, or as the directive calls it, when interconnected with goods. Do you think that the directive should have focused on software by itself and not just when it's interconnected with goods? Ralph?
Software itself, it's another matter. The European Commission expressly decided to adopt another directive concerning contracts for the supply of digital content, separate from the directive on certain aspects of the sale of consumer goods, because of the specific nature of the objects. Software are very specific products, and it's linked to certain aspects of digital content. Thus, it seemed to the Commission that this should be governed by different rules. And in view of the rapid technological and commercial development of digital content, it was felt necessary to retain the possibility of easily amending this directive and to adapt it to practice, to amend it quickly if needed. And that's why I think the legislator decided to adapt two directives. That's my opinion. But of course, we should never forget that both directives complement each other and are constructed, how can I say, on the same logic, on the same basis. Yeah. And we cannot compare software to tangible goods. There's two different products.
And then Lubomir, would you like to add something to that?
I'm agree with Ralph. I personally do not have a view on this issue, and I cannot share an opinion. I assume that the competent authorities, they should talk directly with the companies that create software products and decide whether there should be changes in this direction.
And then I also wanted to ask one more question to Stefan, which is related to the original way that the directive was supposed to be called. It was supposed to be regarding the online sales of goods, and now it's just generally about the sales. Can you please tell us something more about it and explain why the name was changed?
So I think if you compare the two regulations, the two legal texts, you see there are many changes. There is also this change with the software interconnectivity with the good, adding the software liability to it as well, because in the beginning, when it was only online sale of goods, it was only the good, software wasn't included, even if it was a part of a good. So at that moment, if you buy online a smartphone, then the liability is only on the hardware, so only on the material part, right? And I think the reason why it was extended to also to the material world is, I think, this understanding of a market. The market is always the same. There shouldn't be a difference between going to shop online and shopping in the store. So because it would be also negative for the companies which don't have an e-commerce shop, because then the liability for selling e-commerce product would have been higher for the same product than selling them in the shop. So that would lead probably to even more shops closing down, which are now just classical basic building shops and not only some e-commerce website. And there's really no reason to differentiate between in the point of liability, because if I buy a product online or if I buy it in the store, I still want to have the same quality of product. It's true that we have certain rules for buying online, but that's a bit of a different topic, I think. And on the point of the software, if I might also add, it was included in the new legal text, which was adopted. The reason for that is quite simple. If you buy, as mentioned, the smartphone, and we had these cases, right? It's something we had in real life. There were certain sellers which provided certain goods with software, and then basically an update closed or stopped your good from working for your product. So that's why it was interconnected, and in this interconnectivity, you are also liable for the software and not only for the hardware. So I think if you think about it, it makes quite a lot of sense.
Thank you very much. And as we've already started talking about liability, the liability for goods is set for 2 years, where in the first year, the burden of proof is set on the seller. And my question to all three of you is if you find this reasonable. Ralph, would you like to start?
The burden of proof for me, it's maybe it's one of the cornerstones of this directive, maybe the cornerstone. Why? Because we daily do the experience in the European Consumer Center that when consumers contact us, I will give an example. They have bought a product in Germany. In Germany, the reversal of the burden of proof takes place after 6 months. They contact the trader after 1 year because the product is defect. What will happen? The trader will say, "Okay, you have to prove that the product is defect." In general, in the practice, they will never incur expertise costs or pay an expertise or something else. They will give up in most of the cases. And I'm of the opinion that the burden of proof, the period of burden of proof on the trader should match with the liability period. It's up to the trader to prove that the consumer maybe perhaps misused the product. I mean, it's essential to enter an easier enforcement of the union rules on consumer rights in relation to non-conforming goods. So that's my opinion, and it is also my experience. That's even for high-value products, people don't want to incur costs on for an expertise or to pay an expert, and of course for small products, small prices, they will never do it. So it means that when the burden of proof is on the consumers, in the practice, the most of the cases, the consumer gives up.
Yeah, I believe your perspective is really interesting, and also it's great that you gave us those examples. Yeah.
And I wanted to add that the consumer stays and it is always the weaker party to the contract, and for him it will be always difficult to bring such proof, and it will be more difficult for digital products. That's my last remark. It will be more and more complicated, difficult with such products to bring this proof, except if you pay an expert, but that can be really expensive compared with the price of the product.
Yeah, true. And it's really interesting how you called the consumer the weak side. So then I would now like to ask what Lubomir's opinion is, who is kind of representing the stronger side, the seller, and is working with a lot of companies who are doing e-commerce.
Yes, I think Ralph is smiling. I think the seller is not always the stronger side. There is different consumers and different types of people, like different types of sellers. I think the warranty period is determined by the manufacturer and is different for different types of goods. For some products, 2 years can be a very long time. For other, it can be short. For software, maybe it's short. It cannot be the same term for different types of products. For example, it's a different if we sell tools, machines, online cars, products for everyday use, clothes. The warranty should be different. I think not only for 2 years. And I don't know, not every time, Stefan will say more, but not every time the seller is the strongest part. That's why the regulation is here, to help the business to grow and to customers to be happy about what they are buying, but not to make the life harder for the sellers, but to make them make good sales and good product to sell.
Yeah, so basically the big aim is to still have good conditions for both consumers and then companies. And then finally, Stefan, do you have something to add to what's already been said?
Yes, just a remark. In the initial idea and in the initial draft of the regulation, the liability was 2 years and the turn of the burden of proof was also 2 years. And as Lubomir said, you have consumers which are, let's say, lawyer experts. Imagine, Ralph, being a consumer, you are some small shop and now your product doesn't work after 6 months. I mean, I think it's quite clear who knows the law better in that point. So there was a change of mind. It was also an idea, okay, we have to keep some standards for the consumers because it's one of the core values of our market. Because across Europe, you have these 2 years of liability, then you have these 6 months of change of for the proof, like the burden, right? And then the initial idea was to have the 2 years, but it was an agreement or a compromise between balancing the consumer and the seller to go with 1 year turnaround of the burden of proof. The reason for that is you mostly nowadays buy products, as Ralph said, that are extremely complicated to understand. So you as a consumer in most cases don't have a chance, but at the same time, we want the commission wanted to keep the businesses alive, the businesses working with a regulation that's okay for them, and to make it also in their sense to sell good products and not to be liable without putting too much burden on it. So I think in the end, if you compare this to the end result and the beginning result, it's a good compromise, I think.
Ralph, you have something to add?
Yeah, I wanted to say I agree with the fact that it's all the same, a good compromise. But on the other side, when we see, by example, the situation in the Netherlands, the liability, the period of liability is based off the life expectancy of products. That means washing machines or other type of products are guaranteed for a longer time than 2 years. And with this directive, it means that the burden of proof will be always of 1 year or 2 if the Netherlands decide to lay down rules for this maximal period. But it remains a short period, 2 years for a product for which the liability is for 5 or 6 years. But of course, it's a good compromise. It's always better than the former situation and the former provision.
I think I saw Stefan's hand. Do you want to share something else? Okay. Then if there is no other remarks, we'll move on to a question coming from YouTube. Jimmy asks, a true digital single market seems like a faraway dream. as most merchants still don't operate in the whole EU. So what do we have to do in order to get there? Who would like to start? Stefan? Okay.
Sorry, I have to smile because it clearly shows statistically that we got a rise in the e-commerce since we implemented these EU-wide consumer protections, these EU-wide rules for the game, to have an even playing field. So I think what it shows is that the Commission does a quite good job by providing laws that are applicable over the whole EU. I mean, if I think 5 years back, I wasn't buying so much online as I do now. If I think 5 years back, for example, Slovakia didn't have so many e-commerce shops. One of the biggest e-commerce shops beginning with an A wasn't selling at the time to Slovakia. Now they do. I think one of the reasons is also this EU-wide regulation. So yes, we are far away from it, but the statistics and the results show that these kinds of regulation are bringing us there. And that's also to come back to the differentiation between online sales and material sales, why this differentiation shouldn't be there, to have more competition also in the EU market. So I don't think, yes, we are not yet there, but we are in a good way. So yes.
And then Lubomir, do you think we're on a good way to the digital single market? What is your experience from work with your clients?
Okay, good question. I think they must do their research about most common problems in e-commerce if they want to start to sell in whole Europe. The most problems we see in e-commerce that companies they want to sell in whole Europe, it's that they must look around and to know better logistics, how to ship their goods in Europe. There are new services like fulfillment centers that they can provide their products in 3 or 5, 6 countries in Europe, and they will be shipped quickly. But this fulfillment center needs to have more goods because you must to send some quantities in there. The second problem we see in the e-commerce that they want to expand in Europe, it's the payments. They must know how to take money easily and how to take it with no problems, with cards mostly, because here in Bulgaria, here is that we send goods and people pay them in when they receive the goods. In Europe, I think it's not usual this. People pay with card and then. But the other thing they must know about the regulations in the countries. If they sell many enough, they must know what are the laws about selling goods, because if you have to make invoices, too many sales in Germany, you have some regulation in Germany and everything in the Europe. You must know the laws better, and like today's panels, you must know the regulation of e-commerce in Europe. Very good.
And finally, Ralph, you're an expert on EU law. What can you tell us about this question?
I think we're in a good way for this digital market. Of course, there's a lot of work, still a lot of work. And if I have a remark, still a remark about maybe a hurdle, it's maybe the fact that this is maybe another subject, but I will always talk about that. The fact that even if this directive, by example, allows to improve the situation of consumers, to strengthen their rights, we don't succeed to have a full harmonization of consumer law. And that would be really the next step for a real digital single market. In the directive proposal, this was a maximal harmonization objective. But the problem is that it is really difficult to find a compromise between harmonizing the rules and strengthening the rights of the consumers. And that's maybe an aspect which will remain problematic for traders, and also for consumers and for the digital single market.
I'm really happy to hear that we have one more question coming from our audience on YouTube. And it's a question coming from Casper. Wouldn't a harmonization of rules result in less competition because the big monopolies like Amazon, for example, will dominate the markets more easily? I see Stefan shaking his head. Would you like to start on this question?
Sure, why not? I mean, I could now just say, well, Commissioner Vestager is dealing with Amazon right now, so I don't think that should be such a big problem. But okay, look, if I have 28 different laws, who's more likely to get the legal service for 28 different laws? Will it be the small seller from, let's say, Slovakia, Czech Republic, Belgium, whatever? Or will it be a big international company that basically spends worldwide, sells worldwide? So I do think that your harmonization would lead rather to the fact that you will have, or a higher amount of harmonization will lead to the fact that you have less laws to deal with, you have less burdens, as Lubomir partly explained, you have to know these different laws. And I think it's easier for a big company like Amazon with a big legal department, with legal experts from different universities to deal with this than for a small 1-2 person shop. So I think more harmonization does the contrary, and for dealing with monopolies we have Commissioner Vestager. So I think that answers the question quite well.
Okay, thank you. And Ralph or Lubomir, do you want to add something?
I agree.
Okay, then, and you, Lubomir, do you want to add something, or do you agree as well?
Just to add it, some quick thing about, I think that exactly the directive should help grow the small and medium-sized companies in online e-commerce as well, to help them grow and to help them sell more, and not to help grow, big companies like Amazon. They have low departments, they know everything. The small, medium-sized companies, they don't have attorneys, they don't read the directive like the big companies do. I think this directive should help them grow.
Yes, and we've already said quite a lot of things about how good it is for both sides to have the regulations of consumer protection in e-commerce. So I have a question to Ralph, and if it's about whether just EU legislation and legislation on consumer protection is enough or good enough, or do you think that there's more improvement needed in other areas? For example, having more NGOs that inform consumers, or probably you would see improvement in other areas too?
So regarding the matter regulation, as I said before, what I always regret is that it's very difficult to find a compromise between harmonization and a high level of protection consumer. There are of course different interests in the balance, and that's normal. But I think that matter regulation is not the true aspect. Maybe what can I say? I wouldn't say that we need more NGOs, but we should need more NGOs, more specialized NGOs, I would say, and namely consumer organizations specialized in new technologies. Even because there are more and more digital products, digital services, NGOs specialized and with expert networks were able to check the non-compliance of digital products. That would be an idea. That would be an improvement, as this type of product will appear more and more. And technically speaking, this level of expertise will be more and more in demand, as consumers won't be able to prove themselves and easily the non-compliance in numerous cases. As I said before, it will be always difficult, more difficult to consumers to prove the non-compliance of a digital product. And another aspect is the Consumer Protection Cooperation Network, called CPC network, which consists of authorities responsible for enforcing EU consumer protection laws, and they're here to protect consumers' interests in the EU, and to investigate, to tackle infringements, to allowing cooperation on infringements of short duration, such as misleading advertising campaigns. And we work together with this network, and it seems to me that maintaining and even strengthening the cooperation between each national ECC, European Consumer Center, because I didn't have the time at the beginning, but I precise that we have a network. We have a center in each member state. The particularity of our office is that we are in Germany, France and Germany, but we work every day with this network, and we feedback all misleading practices. That's very, very important. And finally, I think that consumer education is a really, really important aspect. We do this experience every day. People order products on websites without checking the identity of the trader, without looking at the legal notice, without reading the terms and conditions. If consumers were a little bit educated and would buy in a responsible manner on the internet, we would have less problems. And that's it's really critical in this regard, I would say. Yeah. I always say, I have an example. I always say, you wouldn't give your credit card number in the street if someone that you don't know requests them, but you do it on the internet very easily without checking the identity of the trader. But it's the same situation. You wouldn't do it in the street, but you do it on the internet. That's an example. But yeah, consumer education is a very, very important aspect.
Thank you for the detailed answer. I sadly have to say that I know people and have heard stories about people giving their credit card details in the streets, but I think that's the minority.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah. And I also have one specific question to Lubomir. We have those EU-wide consumer protection organizations, and we have a representative of one of them here, Ralph, and they help consumers deal with e-commerce problems. And do you think that we need similar institutions established for European companies, and especially for small and medium enterprises?
Ralph? Yes, I think there is a need. As such, this institution should be focused on helping in developing the business and not be focused on sanctions. At the moment, I see the main activities focus mainly on sanctions and very little on development of business. It should also be borne in mind that each profession has specific language, like that Stefan and Ralph are speaking. I'm not a law But if I think about it, if should also be borne in mind that each profession has specific language, and the language should be adapted to the profession that will perform them, that they will sell. If we want to be understood, unfortunately, most of them regulations are written in language accessible for lawyers and are very difficult to understand by those who have comply with them. It should also be understood that small and medium-sized business in enterprise companies do not have opportunities to maintain legal departments. For example, for some lawyer, if an ordinance is written that have to be executed by a software engineer in his language, what they do? I think that it will be very difficult for the lawyers to break it and execute the ordinance. The misunderstanding of what is written in the ordinance also hinders the development of innovation, I think. Though that's my opinion.
And then, Stefan, what do you have to add?
So I have to add both sides. To the side of the consumer protection, there is this process to get a European-wide class action consumer protection class action, right? So in Germany, they now have a Verbandsklage because they didn't want to wait until the European Union does something. Now the European Union is starting to proceed, or the member states, because some member states don't know this mechanism. So yes, there are, as Ralph mentioned, education is one of the points, but sadly, or to be honest, that's something the consumer has to do. I mean, the consumer is old enough, he should be able. Then we have this point with the legal regulations, which Lubomir mentions, and with the differentiations and the difficulties in the language. Yes, it's also a burden for the consumer because the consumer often doesn't understand the legal text, and small enterprises do neither because they don't have a legal department. But I also think that on a European-wide level, there is the need that the member states strengthen different organizations, be it the consumer protection organizations or the supporters of businesses. I mean, you can see it in practice in another law area in the GDPR, where different local authorities act differently. And I think there is also a need on the member state level to say, okay, look, guys, we want to be competitive. We want to have a consumer protection. So let's establish a consumer protection authority, which really actively helps the consumer. But at the same time, you need to, in this authority, a department which actively helps the businesses. And I think it's also a law tradition that certain states, for example, Austria or Germany, they have really strong consumer protections, but also, at least in Austria, I know, really strong company support in the form of WKO, the Wirtschaftskammer, so the economical chapter in Austria. So they really actively help the companies. So I think it's also a question of a member state mission, and it can't be solved centralized because you have these different traditions. So I agree on both sides that you need more improvement in supporting both sides as the regulator, but that has to be done on the member state level, sadly.
And Ralph, I think I saw that you turned on your mic.
Oh. I don't hear you.
Something else to share?
I didn't hear you. I had a problem. Can you repeat, please?
I saw you turning on your mic. Do you have something else to share?
Yes, that's how it works. I agree with Stefan. This is a good idea, and it happens to us sometimes to organize workshops also for traders. Of course, it's not our principal mission. We're here to assist the consumers, but from time to time, sometimes we also organize workshops or presentation. It happened to me to present new regulations to traders in order to inform them so that they better understand the regulation and better protect the consumers. But of course, it's only a very, very small part of our job. Yeah.
Well, I have to say that I really hope that also doing workshops, webinars like this one that we are participating in right now, is helping consumers. And then, as far as I know, Lubomir is also taking part in organizing different conferences targeted at companies. So really, there's quite a lot of things organized out there, both for consumers and then for companies interested in e-commerce. Lubomir, yeah, I see you raising your hand.
Yes, thank you, Maria. We are here doing this quite a long time ago. We do a conference about this to help the business and the online business to grow and to understand. This year, we are organizing the European Digital Week in September. It will be 25 conference in different online fields like fintech, like blockchain, e-commerce, omnichannels, and very. But the European Digital Week will be from the people to the people. It will be mainly from people with practice to say what they think and what is their practice about their field. Thank you.
And we're sadly slowly coming to an end. So I want to ask you to share your final thoughts, and probably if you want to say what you would change about the directive, or what improvements you would like to see, not only just in EU legislation, but also in general related to e-commerce and consumer protection. Who would like to start? Lubomir?
Okay. So to the end, I personally would change a lot of things in European directive. Above all, I would pay more attention in this directive for facilitating the development of e-commerce market rather than making it difficult. This was my practice of view. Take it into the real cases of real online traders and the real cases of real online users. Make the European Online Shopping Directive develop the market and not to suffocate and it wipe out the small and medium-sized online business with unbearable fines and prohibitions. And what I mentioned above, I would write in accessible and understandable language for one who will have to follow the directive. And like Ralph, they do and they make it to make workshops, to make video educations in the both sides. One for the traders, from the sellers, and the one for the consumers, because they are good people and good traders making good business and make a living with that. We see many different cases in the situation of COVID-19. That's everybody have shops, but they close and they sell it online to continue making business. And the other side, to make consumers, there are very good people there, but there are many people that take advantage of their parts. And I think the law must help to protect the sellers in this. Okay, that's enough.
Thank you very much. Then Ralph?
There are several things, not just one thing. Maybe we can regret the fact that the legislator hasn't been more ambitious in order to achieve more sustainable consumption in favor of real circular economy, because this was always mentioned in the recitals, but at the end we don't have any idea where can we find the provisions in favor of a real circular economy? By example, there is no mention about refurbished products. More and more refurbished products are sold online, but we don't know with this directive if it should be considered as second-hand goods or as brand new goods. We don't know. No. And that's one of the aspects. There are other aspects. Maybe the fact that there is no provision about the suspension of the liability period during the negotiations. This is the case, by example, in Germany. This should be harmonized, by example. Lots of small aspects. But I mean, the cornerstone for me is always the burden of proof. I agree with Ljubomir. There are always consumers who take advantage of rules, maybe too much. But on the other side, there will be more and more digital products, complicated products, and consumers have no knowledge, no expertise, and will be not able to prove a non-conformity and non-compliance. It's already complicated with simple tangible goods. It will be more difficult, I think, with digital products. And one last thing, maybe the directive could have laid down rules taking into account the durability of products. Maybe we could have found a compromise a little bit like in the Netherlands, where the liability period is based on the life expectancy of goods. But as I said, there are also consumers who take really advantage too much sometimes. So I can understand the point of view of Ljubomir too.
Yeah, we have to also say and acknowledge that there's different national contexts, so that always kind of influences the different perspective as well. So finally, Stefan, you were supposed to be and still are in the role of the Commissioner for Justice. So I would expect that you wouldn't like to change anything about this directive, but now I would more like to hear the perspective of Stefan, the law student. So what would you like to improve or change about the directive? And if you have any last remarks, you're invited to speak.
So in the role as a commissioner, don't touch it, it's perfect. Honestly, like, I do agree, and it's not only a problem of this regulation that the European regulations have this weird thing that you find in the recitals a lot of things, and then you look through the regulation and you're like, where is it? I mean, you mentioned it up there, but I think that's what you get for reading the small written things, like in contracts, where you find a lot of things. I do think that, personally, I do think that if we want to have a functioning single markets, you need rules that are simple and clear to understand. I do think that in comparison to, for example, Slovak laws, the European laws are written easier to read, at least from my point of view. So there are national laws that are really complicated, but I agree that you need to write the laws easier, but also you need a precise language, because law is, it might sound a bit weird, but it's a precise study, right? You have a word and this word means X. It's like mathematics, 1 + 1 is 2, end of debate. So I do think that's the problem with law, that you need to have precise language and then it's harder to read. I would disagree on the point with Ralph with this idea of having the life circle in it, because I then think you would have in many cases a shorter liability like you have now. I do understand that if you buy a washing machine, you want to have it like 5 to 10 years and not to change it in 2 years. But for example, a smartphone, you can have it 6 years without a problem, from my experience at least. The problem is the security updates and the software updates. So I do think we should push more towards digital as good, but also to cover more education for the customer in the digital world and to the seller, because it's really complicated. And so all in all, I think that the national states, the member states, should do more to support locally, because on the local level, you can bring it to the people the easiest way, and then you don't have it always centralized from Brussels. I think it's also a political question. And I completely agree on the point that you really need on the local level guidance for the seller, especially for the small and middle class companies, because they are basically the backbone of your economy, because they are those that give jobs to the people and so on and so on. So I think you should focus more on them from a European perspective as well.
So thank you very much, Stefan. And sadly, this marks the end of our final digital MUS sessions. Thank you to all of you who watched, and the participants will get a final email soon. And I would also now like to thank all of our speakers who joined us today and presented 3 different perspectives. I found this discussion really educational, and I know that now I'm more aware of what's going on EU level and who I have to turn to as a consumer. So I think that really was a helpful discussion to all of us as consumers, because we all are, as we mentioned in the beginning. Thank you once again for supporting us, to our speakers, to our audience, and for joining us in the middle of summer vacation. And now I'm wishing everyone a really pleasant summer, stay safe, and enjoy your summer vacation. Bye.